Eliza Wren's heels echoed against the marble floor as she walked briskly through the sleek hallways of Blackwood Enterprises. The early morning sun cast soft streaks of gold through the tall windows, highlighting the polished chrome and dark leather of the office interior. The building reflected the man who ruled over it, cold, dark, and ruthlessly efficient. Eliza's hand tightened around the leather binder in her arms as she approached the massive glass doors of the executive suite. Behind those doors was Adrian Blackwood, the man everyone feared, the man she worked for, and the man whose moods shifted like a stormy sea. The security guard outside the office, a bulky man in a black suit, nodded at her. "Good morning, Miss Wren." Eliza offered a small smile before pressing the intercom button on the wall. "Mr. Blackwood?" A low, clipped voice answered. "Come in." Eliza stepped through the heavy glass doors, her heels sinking into the plush black carpet. The office was minimalist yet luxurious. A dark mahogany desk sat at the center, flanked by bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a stunning view of the city skyline. Adrian Blackwood sat at his desk, dressed in a sharp black suit. His dark hair was combed back, and his chiseled features were as cold and unreadable as ever. His gray eyes, steel and calculating, lifted from a stack of documents to meet hers. "Report." Eliza walked to the desk, setting the binder down in front of him. "You have a board meeting at 10, followed by a conference call with the London office. Your lunch with Mr. Sinclair has been moved to 1:30. Also..." She hesitated, her gaze meeting his. Adrian arched a dark brow. "Speak." "There's an issue with Hawthorne Enterprises." Adrian's gaze sharpened instantly. He leaned back in his chair, one hand brushing over his chin. "What kind of issue?" "Damien Hawthorne has been quietly buying out Blackwood shares through a shell company." Adrian's eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. "Damien Hawthorne," he said, his tone laced with venom. "Of course it's him." Eliza's pulse quickened. She knew the history between Adrian and Damien. They had once been business partners, until Damien betrayed Adrian and nearly bankrupted the company. "We've traced the shell company to an offshore account," Eliza continued. "It's confirmed. He's building a hostile takeover." Adrian's hand curled into a fist. His eyes darkened. Eliza studied him carefully. She had worked for him for 5 years. Long enough to understand the subtle shifts in his expression, the way his mouth tightened when he was angry. But this was different. "You need to handle this," Adrian said coldly. Eliza hesitated. "There's more." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "What?" "There's an investor gala tonight," Eliza said carefully. "Damien will be there." Adrian's mouth twisted into a cold smile. "Then so will we." Eliza's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She didn't want to see Damien. Not after everything. Adrian studied her face. "Something wrong?" Eliza forced a smile. "No, sir." "Good," Adrian said, rising from his chair. His imposing height made her feel small. His gaze swept over her, lingering on her face. "Find out who else Damien has been working with. We'll strike before he has a chance to make a move." "Yes, sir." Eliza turned to leave, but Adrian's voice stopped her. "Eliza." She turned back. His gray eyes darkened. "Wear black tonight." The gala was held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, a glittering jewel of glass and steel. Black tie attendees floated across the marble floor, diamonds catching the light as champagne flowed. Eliza wore a sleek black gown that hugged her figure, the satin material pooling around her feet. Her hair was pulled into a smooth bun and diamond studs sparkled in her ears. She carried herself with cool confidence, ignoring the flutter of anxiety in her chest. Adrian stood at her side, a black tuxedo highlighting his broad shoulders and lean frame. He was the center of attention, the king surveying his kingdom. Adrian Blackwood. Eliza's spine stiffened as a familiar voice slid through the air. Damien Hawthorne approached them, dressed in a tailored navy suit. His blonde hair was swept back and his blue eyes glittered with amusement. He smiled lazily. "Nice to see you, Adrian." Adrian's mouth curled into a dangerous smile. "Damien." Damien's gaze slid toward Eliza. His eyes darkened. "And Eliza, I have to say you look stunning." Eliza forced a polite smile. "Thank you." Adrian's hand settled on the small of her back, a possessive gesture that made Damien's smile sharpen. "I didn't expect to see you here," Damien said smoothly. "Clearly," Adrian replied. "I hear you've been busy." Damien's smile widened. "Business is business." Adrian's gaze hardened. "Stay out of mine." Damien chuckled. "We'll see." He leaned toward Eliza, his voice low. "I hope you've been well." Eliza's stomach twisted. Memories flashed. Damien's hand around her wrist, his voice whispering sweet lies, the humiliation of discovering he had used her. Adrian's hand tightened on her waist. His voice was ice. "Walk away, Damien." Damien's gaze lingered on Eliza before he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Eliza released a shaky breath. Adrian's hand remained on her back. His voice was low. "Are you all right?" Eliza nodded. "You don't need to fear him," Adrian murmured. "I'm not afraid of him," Eliza said. Adrian's gaze sharpened. He lifted her chin with his fingers, forcing her to look at him. "You're stronger than him," he said softly. Her heart raced. The moment stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. "Eliza," Adrian murmured. Their faces were inches apart. His gaze dropped to her lips. "Mr. Blackwood." Alexander's voice cut through the moment. Adrian stepped back, his face hardening. Alexander approached, his gaze wary. "We have a problem." Adrian's expression darkened. "What kind of problem?" Alexander's gaze shifted toward Eliza. "I think someone in your company has been feeding information to Damien." Eliza's breath hitched. Adrian's gaze sharpened. "Who?" Alexander hesitated. His gaze slid toward Eliza. Eliza's heart pounded. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Eliza." Her breath caught. "You think I don't know," Alexander said. "But Damien's information is too accurate. He knows things only someone on the inside would." Adrian's gaze burned into her. His expression hardened. "Eliza," Adrian said coldly, "have you been talking to Damien?" Her eyes widened. "What?" "No." Adrian's gaze was cold and calculating. For the first time she saw doubt in his eyes. "You think I betrayed you?" Eliza whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened. "I trusted you," he said quietly. Eliza's chest tightened painfully. "I would never betray you," she whispered. Adrian's gaze lingered on her for a long moment. Then his expression hardened. "Go home," he said coldly. Eliza's heart sank. She turned and walked away, her vision blurring with tears. Behind her, Adrian stood alone, shadows darkening his face as the storm inside him deepened. Eliza sat in her apartment, the dim glow of the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glass of red wine in her hand trembled slightly as she brought it to her lips. Her mind raced with everything that had happened the night before. Adrian had doubted her. After years of loyalty, years of standing beside him as his most trusted confidant, he had looked at her as though she were a threat. "I trusted you," he had said. That's what hurt the most. The fact that, after everything, he still believed she could betray him. Her phone vibrated on the glass coffee table. She glanced down at the screen. Adrian Blackwood. Eliza's breath hitched. She stared at the name for a long moment before silencing the call. "Not tonight." She curled her legs beneath her and sank deeper into the leather couch, ignoring the way her heart tightened painfully. She had given so much of herself to that man, her time, her effort, her loyalty, and yet he had turned on her so quickly. A sharp knock on the door made her jump. "Eliza." Adrian's voice. Low and dark. She sighed, setting down the wine glass. "Of course." Eliza opened the door. "Go away, Adrian," she called out. Silence. Then a loud click as the lock turned. Her eyes widened as Adrian stepped into the apartment, dressed in a black overcoat and tailored suit. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his sharp eyes pinned her in place. "How did you?" "I have a key," he said flatly. Eliza narrowed her eyes. "That was for emergencies." "This is an emergency." She sighed. "Breaking and entering isn't usually how you handle emergencies." Adrian closed the door behind him and walked toward her with quiet, dangerous grace. His gaze swept over her. She was wearing black silk shorts and a tank top. Her long dark hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders. She folded her arms over her chest, aware of how exposed she was under his gaze. Adrian's mouth curled into a faint smirk. You're angry. No, she replied icily. I'm pissed. Adrian's expression darkened. He sank onto the couch beside her, his knee brushing against hers. Eliza, he said quietly. We need to talk. She shook her head. You accused me of betraying you. What's there to talk about? Adrian's jaw tightened. Alexander made a good point. Damien has too much information about our deals. The leak has to be internal. And you assumed it was me? I didn't want to, he said darkly. That's not the same as trusting me. Adrian's gaze sharpened. You're the only one with access to the contracts. Who else would it be? Eliza's chest tightened painfully. I've stood by you for 5 years, Adrian. Through every crisis. Every scandal. And you still think I could turn on you? Adrian's gaze darkened. You're right. Eliza's eyes widened. I was wrong, he said softly. She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. Adrian Blackwood never admitted when he was wrong. His hand reached out, brushing over her knee. Eliza. His voice was low. Dangerous. Her breath caught. His hand slid up to her thigh, his thumb brushing the edge of her silk shorts. Heat bloomed across her skin. You think apologizing will make me forgive you? She whispered. Adrian's mouth curled into a dark smile. I don't expect you to forgive me. His fingers tightened on her leg. But you're not walking away from me. Eliza's breath hitched. I'm not your property, she snapped. No, Adrian murmured. But you are mine. Her eyes widened. Adrian's gaze sharpened, the intensity in his expression making her stomach twist. You can be angry, Adrian said softly. You can hate me. But you're not leaving. And why's that? His eyes darkened. Because I don't trust anyone else, he said. Eliza's breath hitched. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his gaze darkening as he read the message. Damien just bought another 10% of the shares, Adrian said. His voice was sharp. Eliza's blood ran cold. That's nearly enough to get him on the board, she whispered. Adrian stood abruptly. His expression hardened. We need to stop him. How? Adrian's gaze sharpened. We go after his allies. Cut off his resources. Eliza stood. And what if that doesn't work? Adrian's gaze darkened. Then we destroy him. 2 days later, Eliza stood at the glass wall of Adrian's office, watching the city lights glitter below. Her reflection stared back at her, sharp black dress, dark eyes lined with coal. Her mouth was a thin line. You're tense. Eliza turned. Adrian stood behind her, hands in his pockets. His black suit was crisp, his silver tie perfectly knotted. Wouldn't you be? She replied. He smiled faintly. Damien won't win. And if he does? Adrian's gaze darkened. He stepped toward her, his hands brushing down her arms. His voice lowered. I don't lose. The doors opened. Alexander walked in. His expression was serious. We found the leak, Alexander said. Adrian's eyes sharpened. Who? Alexander hesitated. Victoria. Eliza's breath hitched. Adrian's expression didn't change. Explain. She's been working with Damien for the past 6 months. Feeding him information through an offshore account. Eliza's chest tightened. And Damien's goal? To bankrupt Blackwood Enterprises and force Adrian to sell, Alexander said grimly. Adrian's jaw clenched. Where is Victoria now? Alexander's gaze darkened. She's meeting Damien tonight at the Grand Pavilion. Adrian's eyes gleamed coldly. Then it's time to pay them a visit. Later that night, Eliza sat beside Adrian in the back of a black sedan. The Grand Pavilion's lights glittered outside the tinted windows. Adrian's jaw was sharp, his expression unreadable. He looked like a predator about to strike. Are you sure about this? Eliza asked softly. Adrian's gaze didn't shift from the window. You don't have to come. Eliza smiled faintly. Yes, I do. They stepped into the lobby of the Grand Pavilion. The hotel's marble floors gleamed beneath the crystal chandeliers. Adrian's gaze swept the room until he spotted them. Damien and Victoria sat at a table near the back. Victoria wore a silver dress, her dark hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Damien leaned close to her, smiling. Adrian strode across the room. Eliza followed, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Victoria's smile faded when she saw them. Well, Damien drawled. Look who's here. Adrian's gaze was ice. Victoria. Victoria's smile twisted. Adrian. You thought you could betray me? Adrian's voice was quiet, lethal. Victoria's eyes glittered. You left me no choice. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Do you have any idea what you've done? Victoria's smile widened. I've already won. Damien smirked. He's right, Adrian. It's over. Adrian's mouth curled into a dangerous smile. No. You lost. Eliza pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. What are you doing? Damien demanded. Releasing the evidence of insider trading, Eliza said smoothly. Damien's eyes widened. You don't have the evidence, he hissed. Eliza smiled coldly. We do now. Damien's face twisted with rage. Victoria's smile faded. You. Adrian's gaze darkened. Security, he said coldly. Two men in suits approached the table. Damien's face paled as they pulled him to his feet. This isn't over, Damien hissed as they dragged him away. Victoria stood, her expression tightening. Adrian's gaze sharpened. It's over. Victoria's lips curled. You still have me. Adrian's smile was cold. No. I have everything I need. He turned to Eliza. Victoria's eyes darkened as Adrian took Eliza's hand and led her away. Eliza's heart raced as Adrian leaned toward her, his voice low. I told you, he murmured. I don't lose. Eliza stood in the large glass conference room of Blackwood Enterprises, her arms crossed over her chest. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. The morning air was tense, thick with an undercurrent of unease. Across the table, Adrian stood with his back to her, his hands braced on the glass as he stared out at the city skyline. His tailored suit hugged the sharp lines of his frame, his dark hair slightly tousled. He hadn't spoken in the past 5 minutes. Alexander sat at the other end of the table, his eyes narrowed. His phone rested in front of him, the screen glowing faintly. So, Alexander said, breaking the silence. Damien's been removed from the board. Adrian's jaw tightened. Not soon enough. He didn't go quietly, Alexander added. He's already talking to the press. His version of the story makes you look like the villain. Adrian's mouth twisted into a cold smile. Let him try. Eliza shifted, her gaze sliding toward Adrian. He was calm, too calm. She had known Adrian long enough to recognize when the storm was brewing beneath the surface. What about Victoria? Alexander asked. Adrian's eyes darkened. She's not a threat anymore. Eliza's stomach tightened. Victoria had been working with Damien to dismantle Blackwood Enterprises from the inside. The betrayal had cut deep, not just because Adrian had trusted Victoria once, but because it had nearly cost him everything. You don't seem concerned, Alexander said carefully. I'm not, Adrian replied. Victoria lost. Still, Alexander said. It's not like her to give up so easily. Adrian's gaze sharpened. What are you suggesting? Alexander leaned back, his gaze thoughtful. If Damien couldn't destroy you directly, Victoria might try to undermine you from the shadows. She can try, Adrian said coldly. Alexander sighed. You sound very sure of yourself. Adrian's mouth curled faintly. I don't lose. Alexander's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down, his eyes narrowing. Another buyout attempt, Alexander said grimly. From an offshore account. Eliza stiffened. Damien. Alexander's gaze darkened. No. Eliza's pulse quickened. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Then who? Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. I'm working on it. Eliza's chest tightened. Damien was in custody, but someone else was moving against Blackwood Enterprises. Adrian's gaze slid toward her. His eyes darkened. Eliza, he said quietly. Come with me. Later that afternoon, Adrian's sleek black private jet touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Eliza followed Adrian down the runway, her heels clicking against the pavement. She wore a fitted black suit, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Adrian's hand brushed the small of her back as they approached the waiting black car. Why Paris? Eliza asked as they slid into the leather seats. Because that's where the leak is coming from, Adrian said coldly. Eliza's heart skipped. Victoria. Maybe, Adrian murmured. But there's another player involved. The car sped toward the city center. Eliza studied Adrian's sharp profile as he stared out the window. His jaw was tight, his gaze hard. What are you thinking? Eliza asked softly. That I don't like not knowing who my enemies are, Adrian replied. Eliza hesitated. Adrian. His gaze slid toward her. What if this doesn't end, she whispered. Adrian's hand slid over hers. His thumb brushed the back of her hand. It ends, he said quietly. Tonight. That evening, Adrian and Eliza entered the Hotel de Krillin under the cover of darkness. The hotel's lavish gold and white interior glittered under the soft chandeliers. Alexander was already seated at a corner table, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He rose as Adrian and Eliza approached. The contact is here, Alexander said quietly. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Where? Alexander's eyes slid toward the grand staircase. A woman descended the steps, her red dress trailing behind her like blood. Her blonde hair fell in loose waves and her red lips curved into a sly smile. Victoria, Adrian murmured. Eliza's chest tightened. Victoria's eyes glittered as she approached. Adrian. Eliza. Eliza's mouth tightened. I'm surprised you had the courage to show up, Adrian said coldly. Victoria's smile sharpened. I'm not your enemy. Adrian's jaw clenched. No? Then why are you working with Damien? Victoria's gaze slid toward Eliza. Do you know why Adrian always keeps you so close? Eliza's spine stiffened. Because he knows you're dangerous, Victoria said softly. He trusts you, but he's also afraid of you. Adrian's eyes narrowed. I don't have time for games, Adrian said sharply. Victoria's smile faded. Then I'll get to the point. She held out a small USB drive. Adrian's gaze darkened. What's this? Proof, Victoria said softly. Adrian took the drive, his gaze cold. Proof of what? Victoria's smile curled. Proof that Damien wasn't the one pulling the strings. Eliza's breath hitched. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Then who? Victoria's eyes glittered dangerously. Figure it out. She turned and walked away, her red dress trailing behind her. Eliza's heart pounded. What now? She asked. Adrian's gaze was cold and hard. Now we find out who's really behind this. Later that night, Adrian sat at his laptop in the penthouse suite. The screen glowed faintly, the room dark except for the city lights beyond the glass windows. Eliza sat on the edge of the couch, her knees drawn up. Her pulse quickened as Adrian inserted the USB drive. Files appeared on the screen. Dozens of them. Emails. Contracts. Bank statements. Adrian's jaw tightened. His gaze sharpened. Eliza, he said quietly. She stood and crossed the room toward him. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at the screen. The name at the top of the document made her stomach drop. Alexander Gray. Eliza's breath hitched. No. Adrian's eyes darkened. His mouth pressed into a hard line. Alexander's been working with Damien? Adrian's expression hardened. It looks that way. Eliza's chest tightened painfully. Adrian. A sharp knock on the door cut her off. Adrian's gaze narrowed. He rose to his feet, crossing the room to open the door. Alexander stood in the hallway, his expression cool and composed. You've been busy, Adrian said coldly. Alexander's gaze darkened. I see you've figured it out. Adrian's eyes burned with ice. Why? Alexander's gaze flicked toward Eliza. His mouth curled faintly. Because I know you, Alexander said softly. You would have destroyed me eventually. So I made the first move. Adrian's hands curled into fists. You betrayed me, Adrian growled. Alexander smiled faintly. Nothing personal. Adrian lunged forward. Alexander sidestepped neatly. You've already lost, Alexander said. I made sure of it. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Did you? Eliza stepped forward. We have the files, she said softly. Alexander's smile faded. You can't prove. We can, Adrian said coldly. Alexander's expression darkened. I'm not going down alone, Alexander said. Adrian's eyes sharpened dangerously. Yes, you are. Security entered the room. Alexander's mouth twisted as they seized his arms. "This isn't over," Alexander hissed as they dragged him away. Adrian's gaze was cold. "Yes, it is." Eliza watched as Alexander disappeared down the hall. Adrian's gaze softened. He turned toward her, his hand brushing down her arm. "It's over," he said softly. Eliza's chest tightened painfully. "What now?" she whispered. Adrian's eyes darkened. "Now," he murmured, "we finish this." Eliza sat alone in Adrian's penthouse, the quiet hum of the city filling the darkened room. The sleek glass walls reflected the glittering lights of the skyline, but the view did nothing to calm the storm inside her chest. Her mind replayed the events of the past few days like fragments of a broken mirror. Adrian's cold expression when he accused her, Victoria's cryptic warning, and Alexander's betrayal. She had trusted Alexander. Adrian had trusted Alexander. He had been Adrian's closest friend, his confidant. And yet Alexander had been working with Damien from the beginning, feeding him information, manipulating Adrian's every move. Eliza curled her knees against her chest, resting her chin on top of them. Her heart still raced from the confrontation. The look in Adrian's eyes when Alexander had admitted the truth. It had been the same cold emptiness she had seen when Adrian's father had died. Adrian had learned long ago that trust was a weapon, and it had been used against him once again. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, cutting through the heavy silence. She reached for it, her heart skipping when she saw the caller ID. Adrian Blackwood. Eliza hesitated before answering. "Adrian. I need you at the office," he said, his voice low and controlled. She frowned. "Now?" "Yes." "Why?" Adrian's voice hardened. "Because it's not over." Eliza's heels clicked against the polished marble floor as she stepped into the executive wing of Blackwood Enterprises. It was nearly midnight, and the building was dark except for the glow of the office lights above Adrian's suite. Her heart thudded painfully as she approached the double glass doors. Adrian was standing at the window, his back to her. His dark suit blended into the shadows, his figure illuminated only by the city lights beyond the glass. "Eliza." She stepped toward him. "What's going on?" Adrian turned, his expression cold and sharp. His gray eyes glittered with quiet fury. "Alexander's been bailed out." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "He posted bail an hour ago," Adrian said darkly. "And now he's making threats." Eliza's chest tightened painfully. "Threats?" Adrian's mouth pressed into a thin line. He picked up a file from the desk and tossed it toward her. Eliza caught it, her hands trembling as she opened the folder. Her breath hitched. Inside were photographs, pictures of Adrian and Eliza, walking together, standing too close. In his office. At the gala. At his penthouse. Eliza's pulse quickened. "What is this?" "Alexander gave these to the press," Adrian said coldly. "He's claiming that you've been influencing company decisions because you're involved with me." Eliza's heart twisted painfully. "That's not true." Adrian's gaze darkened. "It doesn't matter. The story will spread. And once it does, the board will demand that I step down." Eliza's fingers tightened around the file. "This is retaliation." "Yes." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "And it's not just about the company. He wants to humiliate me." "He wants to humiliate you." Eliza's chest burned with anger. "We can fight this." Adrian's mouth curled into a cold smile. "We already are." "What do you mean?" "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow morning." Eliza's breath hitched. "Adrian, if you admit to any of this." "I'm not admitting to anything," Adrian cut in. "But I'm not denying it either." Eliza's chest tightened painfully. "Adrian." Adrian's gaze darkened. "Alexander wants to use you to destroy me. He thinks that making this public will ruin us both." Eliza's pulse quickened. "And you think letting the rumors spread will stop him?" Adrian's expression softened. His eyes darkened as he stepped toward her. "No," he said quietly. "But standing beside you might." Eliza's breath caught. Adrian's hand lifted to her jaw, his thumb brushing her cheek. "If we stand together," he said softly, "Alexander can't touch us." Eliza's heart raced beneath her ribcage. Adrian's gaze burned into hers. "I don't care what the board thinks," Adrian murmured. Eliza's lips parted. But if you don't want to be seen with me. I don't care what they think either, Eliza whispered. Adrian's eyes sharpened. His hand slipped behind her neck, drawing her close. Eliza. Her breath hitched. His lips were so close, barely an inch away. She closed the distance. Their mouths met in a fierce, hungry kiss. Adrian's hands tangled in her hair as he pulled her flush against him. Eliza's arms wound around his neck, her heart pounding wildly as Adrian's mouth claimed hers. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. Months, years of unspoken tension breaking all at once. Adrian's hands slid down her waist, gripping her hips as he pressed her against the glass window. Eliza's breath broke into a gasp as Adrian's mouth moved to her throat. Adrian. You're mine, Adrian growled against her skin. Eliza's heart raced. I know, she whispered. Adrian's mouth crushed against hers again. Her fingers tangled in his hair, her breath breaking into shallow gasps as his hands slipped beneath her jacket, skimming over her skin. Eliza. Adrian's voice was dark and dangerous. She pulled back, breathless, her forehead resting against his. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. Adrian's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. I won't let them touch you, Adrian said quietly. Eliza's gaze sharpened. Then let's fight this together. The following evening, Adrian stood on the rooftop of Blackwood Enterprises, his dark figure outlined against the glow of the city. Eliza stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm. You're sure about this? She whispered. Adrian's gaze hardened. Alexander will come. How do you know? Because he thinks he's already won. A door opened behind them. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Alexander stepped into the light, his expression cool and controlled. Well, Alexander said softly. I didn't expect you to invite me. Adrian's mouth curled into a dangerous smile. You've been busy. Alexander smiled faintly. And you've been careless. Adrian's eyes darkened. Have I? Alexander's gaze slid toward Eliza. It's a shame, Alexander murmured. If you hadn't trusted her, none of this would have happened. Eliza's blood turned cold. Adrian's hand tightened over hers. His gaze sharpened dangerously. You're forgetting one thing, Adrian said softly. Alexander arched a brow. I trust her, Adrian said quietly. And I never trusted you. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Adrian smiled coldly. I had you followed. Alexander's gaze sharpened. Eliza pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A security feed lit up, showing Alexander standing beside Victoria in the Grand Pavilion. Eliza's gaze sharpened. You signed the contracts under a shell company, Eliza said coldly. Alexander's face twisted. You can't prove that. Eliza smiled faintly. Yes, we can. Alexander's eyes darkened. He stepped forward. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Security, Adrian said coolly. Four guards stepped onto the rooftop. Alexander's mouth twisted. You think this is over? Alexander hissed. Adrian smiled faintly. I know it is. Alexander's eyes burned with fury as the guards closed in. You're making a mistake, Alexander growled. No, Adrian said quietly. I'm correcting one. Alexander's mouth twisted as the guards pulled him toward the stairwell. Adrian's gaze remained cold and hard. You don't deserve my loyalty, Adrian said quietly. Alexander's mouth curled into a bitter smile. We'll see about that. The door slammed shut behind him. Eliza's heart pounded. Adrian's arms slid around her waist. It's over, Adrian murmured. Eliza leaned into him, her breath shaky. You saved me, Adrian whispered. Eliza's hand slid over his chest. I would do it again, she whispered. Adrian's gaze darkened. I know. Eliza stood at the edge of the balcony in Adrian's penthouse, the cool evening breeze sweeping through her hair. Below her, the glittering lights of the city stretched endlessly into the night. The air was crisp, but the weight in her chest made it hard to breathe. The events of the past few days felt surreal. Alexander's betrayal, Victoria's manipulation, Damien's destruction. It was over, or at least that's what Adrian had said. But Eliza knew better. It was never truly over. The sound of footsteps behind her made her pulse quicken. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Eliza. Adrian's deep, low voice sent shivers down her spine. She turned slowly to face him. Adrian was leaning against the glass railing, dressed in a dark tailored suit. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing the hard lines of his forearms. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his gray eyes burned beneath the low light of the city. Eliza's breath hitched. "Couldn't sleep?" Adrian asked softly. Eliza smiled faintly. "Neither could you." Adrian's gaze sharpened as he stepped toward her. His hands slid into his pockets, his expression dark and unreadable. "You should rest," he said quietly. "I could say the same to you." Adrian's mouth twisted into a faint smile. He stopped just inches from her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off his body. Eliza's gaze slid over his face, the hard lines of his jaw, the tension in his brow. He was tired, exhausted. "You're thinking about him," Eliza said softly. Adrian's eyes darkened. "Alexander." She nodded. Adrian's jaw clenched. "He was my friend. And he betrayed you." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "I should have seen it coming. You couldn't have known." Adrian's hand brushed over her jaw, his thumb trailing lightly over her cheek. "I should have known better," Adrian murmured. Eliza's breath hitched. Her hand slid over his chest, feeling the hard thud of his heartbeat beneath her fingertips. "Adrian," she whispered, "he's gone now. He can't hurt you anymore." Adrian's gaze softened as his hand brushed through her hair. "I don't care about what happens to me," Adrian said quietly. "But if he had hurt you..." Eliza's chest tightened painfully. "He didn't." Adrian's eyes darkened. "He tried. And you stopped him." Adrian's hand slid down to her waist, his fingers brushing over the bare skin beneath her blouse. "You don't have to protect me," Eliza whispered. Adrian's mouth curled into a faint smile. "I know." Eliza's pulse quickened as Adrian leaned down, his lips brushing over her ear. "But I will anyway," Adrian murmured. Eliza's breath broke into a shaky gasp. Her hand slid over his chest, curling into the fabric of his shirt. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Adrian's gaze sharpened. His hand lifted to her jaw, tilting her face upward. His mouth hovered inches from hers. "Promise me," Adrian said softly. Eliza's heart pounded painfully. "I promise." Adrian's lips brushed over hers, a slow, lingering kiss that sent heat shooting through her veins. His hand slid into her hair, his mouth pressing deeper against hers. Eliza's arms wound around his neck, her body arching into him as his hands tightened on her waist. When Adrian finally pulled back, his eyes were dark and stormy. "You're mine," Adrian murmured. Eliza smiled faintly. "I always was." 3 days passed without incident. For the first time in months, the company was steady. The press had shifted focus, the rumors about Adrian and Eliza's relationship dying down thanks to a carefully crafted statement. But Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. She stood at her desk, scanning the latest financial reports when Adrian's intercom buzzed. "Eliza." She pressed the button. "Yes." "Come to my office." Eliza's brows furrowed. Adrian's voice sounded different. She crossed the sleek hallway and pushed open the heavy glass doors of Adrian's office. Adrian stood by the window, dressed in a dark navy suit. The city lights behind him framed his tall figure, casting long shadows across the room. Eliza's chest tightened at the sight of him. "You called." Adrian turned. His gaze was sharp and intense. "Sit," he said quietly. Eliza hesitated before walking toward the leather chair in front of his desk. Her pulse quickened as Adrian approached her, his hands slipping into his pockets. "I've been thinking," Adrian said slowly. Eliza's heart hammered painfully. "About what?" Adrian's gaze darkened. "You." Eliza's breath hitched. "I don't care about the company," Adrian said softly. "I don't care about the board or the press or what happens tomorrow." Eliza's heart raced. "But you," Adrian's hand brushed over her jaw. "You matter." Eliza's mouth parted. "Adrian." "I've never trusted anyone the way I trust you," Adrian murmured. "You stood by me when no one else did." Eliza's breath caught. "I don't want to lose you," Adrian whispered. Eliza's gaze softened. "You won't," she whispered. Adrian's hand slid into his pocket. Eliza's eyes widened as he pulled out a small black box. Her heart stopped. Adrian lowered to one knee. Eliza Wren, Adrian said softly. Eliza's breath broke into a shaky gasp. I'm not good at this, Adrian said. But I know one thing. I need you. I love you. And I don't want to spend another day without you. Tears burned behind Eliza's eyes. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Marry me, Adrian whispered. Eliza's breath hitched painfully. You want to marry me? Adrian smiled faintly. I don't just want to, Adrian said softly. I need to. Eliza's hand lifted to her mouth. Her chest tightened painfully. Adrian. He lifted the box, opening it to reveal a silver diamond ring. The stone glinted beneath the light, catching the reflection of the city beyond the glass windows. Eliza's heart thudded painfully. Yes, she whispered. Adrian's gaze darkened. Yes. Eliza smiled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes. Adrian's mouth curled into a rare smile. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her against him, his mouth capturing hers in a fierce, desperate kiss. Eliza's arms wound around his neck as Adrian lifted her off her feet. I love you, Adrian whispered. Eliza smiled breathlessly. I love you too. 2 weeks later, Eliza stood beneath an archway of white roses. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled light across the marble aisle. Adrian stood at the end of the aisle, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo. His gray eyes softened as he watched her approach. Eliza's heart raced as she stepped toward him. Her silk dress trailed behind her, her veil billowing in the soft breeze. Adrian's hand slid into hers as she reached the altar. You look, Adrian's voice broke. Beautiful. Eliza smiled softly. You're not so bad yourself. The officiant's voice faded into the background as Adrian's hand tightened over hers. I promise to protect you, Adrian murmured. I promise to stand beside you, Eliza whispered. Adrian's gaze softened. I'm yours, he whispered. Eliza smiled faintly. I always was. Adrian's lips brushed over hers, sealing the vow. The crowd erupted into applause, but Eliza barely heard it over the thundering of her heart. Adrian lifted her into his arms as they walked down the aisle. They had fought wars together. They had survived betrayal and destruction. And now they had won. The end.